So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the May 2021 session of the Artist Salon series. My name is Kathy Tykolis. I'm the Richmond Art Gallery's Education and Public Programs Coordinator, and I'll be your host for today's sessions with our guest artists, Nancy Lee and Karen Bumber. I want to thank you all for joining us today from wherever you're zooming in on in this beautiful day and supporting the Richmond Art Gallery's public programs. For those of you who are new to the program, the Salon is a monthly series of talks by arts professionals held on the last Saturday of every month from February to November. The goal of the program is to offer a mix of professional development tips, community building, and inspiration for artists to keep on making your work. So the Salon also does exist as a Facebook group, providing resources for artists in the Lower Mainland, including posts for open calls, local arts events, professional development opportunities, as well as a space for you all to connect with each other. So you're all welcome to join that. And all the info on that is on the gallery's website, which I've included the link in the chat right now for you to look at. So before we begin, I did want to start with an introduction that was made especially for us here at the Richmond Art Gallery by local elder Cecilia Point. So I'm just going to play this for you now. It's a very short clip, and then we'll start the salon.
Asiem Nasiea, Anta Cecilia Point, Talitanathwa Wamasquium, Amid Subquilum, Natsamat Tesqualoan. I said my name's Cecilia Point. I'm from the Musqueam First Nation, and I want to welcome everyone here today. And I said we're all of one heart and one mind. So whenever I give a welcome, I ask my ancestors to tell me what I'm supposed to say, what message I'm supposed to deliver. And also the purpose of the welcome is to give people a sense of place of where they are. So I want you to think way back to when there was no buildings here, thinking about my ancestor Manat, my great-grandpa, who lived to be 104. So he literally saw the Lower Mainland drop on him like a building. It was all trees and rivers and water. And he talked about how we used to, of course, go berry picking and fishing and stripping cedar. And we used to collect wool from goats that were indigenous to these territories here and make our blankets. And I remember myself as a child in Richmond catching oolakins in my bare hands in the river. So many changes have happened. And I'm thinking about my granny, Hualequalat, whose mother brought her in a canoe from Squamish over to our longhouse in Musqueam, where she married my grandpa. So the other message I'm getting is not one of my ancestors, but a well-known indigenous person, Louis Riel. And he said, "My people will sleep for 100 years. And when they awake, it's the artists who will bring their spirit back." So I'm thinking about the Arts and Culture Gallery and all of the wonderful cultural activities that come here from all the people that live here now. And we share all of our cultures and we stand in solidarity with each other and we learn about each other. So I'm very happy that this space exists and that these activities exist. So I want to welcome you with a song from my great-grandpa, or from my great-uncle Dominic Point, and it's our canoe song. So picture us going out on our canoes on the river and greeting you, the visitors, coming in on your canoes. OCM. symposium.
Thank you, Cecilia Point, for that lovely welcome. It's really nice to have that done just for us here at the gallery. So for now, I would like to introduce our guest artists, Nancy Lee and Kieran Bumber. Nancy and Kieran are the co-creators of the current exhibition at the Richmond Art Gallery, Union, that is running until June 5th, 2021. And it is co-presented with Cinevolution Media Arts Society and part of their digital Carnival Z. So this is a completely new work by the artists, and it incorporates XR, performance, sculpture, multi-channel sound, and video installation. The artists did work with a large creative team and often work with a team of other artists when producing their works. I will pop in their individual bios into the chat for you to look at. They both call themselves interdisciplinary media artists, which is a huge scope and is really specific and unique to each artist. So I will post that in there for you. And that is also part of the reason why I thought they'd be such great presenters for today. I get asked a lot by salon participants, how do you find your focus? How do you just focus on that one thing? And I personally don't think artists need to. I think we should all be interdisciplinary artists, and finding things that interest you, finding things that, are maybe just part of other elements of your life, and trying out new things and bringing them all together to create a more interdisciplinary art practice. And I think Nancy and Kieran are great examples of this. They work with a lot of people. Anything they don't know, they figure it out, and they ask people, that can help them out, which again is something I think as all artists we should be doing, and just really expanding your own community. So for today, I've reached out for them to just kind of expand on that idea and to see, part of their journey and to how they got to where they are today. And just how they work. How do you work with a team, especially if you're an artist that's used to working by yourself? How do you work in a collaborative environment? And then just offer up some tips for those of you out there who might want to explore trying new things or different ideas within your own art practice as well. So I will now open it up to our guest artists. I will disappear into the background and come back after they present to answer any of your questions. So again, a reminder, just keep popping in any questions in the chat throughout, as opposed to waiting to the end. So welcome, Nancy and Kieran. The stage is yours.
Thank you for the introductions.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I'm Nancy Lee.
And I'm Kieran Bumber.
And we will do some screen sharing here while we pull up our PowerPoint. So, Kieran and I in this photo as our title page. This is a photo of us when we were performing in Mumbai in India.
Yeah, we were fortunate enough to take our pieces to Asia on multiple occasions. In particular, we reached out to a collective in Mumbai called Homegrown, and they focus on like contemporary South Asian voices and ideas. And so we were able to perform our piece Hollow Vertices and also have an installation there.
So, we, at least for me, I did not come from like a traditional kind of artist pathway. I never went to art school. And I got into, art making by throwing underground parties. So that's kind of where my thing kind of, where I kind of come to art making is from kind of a community practice.
Yeah, and I definitely came from more of like, I would say the more nerdy side of art making. I grew up as like a band nerd. So I played the clarinet in like middle school and high school, and was really into like sciences. And then I was like, okay, do I go into sciences or music? And did a year of science and then hated it, realized I want to go back to music. And then when I left school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I knew I wanted to make stuff. I knew I wanted to like make art, but I didn't know how to do it. So I would just go to shows by myself and kind of experiment on my own and just go to shows and start talking to people. And I eventually went to this show, which you see here, or this party, if you will, which is one of Nancy's parties. And this was in 2013.
Yeah, late
This
2013.
late 2013. And I remember going to this party and, you know, I was so inspired by, you know, the DIY element of the party, the musical performances, and then also like the staging of it, which Nancy had built these swing sets. And people were having so much fun on the swing sets. It's like, it's incredible how, you know, something that is so familiar to us can activate this sense of play. And while I was on the swing set swinging, being a participant, there was projections around us. And during my time at UBC, I experimented with like interactive performance and technology. And I remember thinking, oh, it'd be cool if the swings could change the projections, or like we can change sounds with the swinging motions. And then Nancy and I met again at New Forms Festival as a volunteer. So this was like another like, okay, I want to meet people. I want to see what's going on. I want to be a part of the community. And that's when we started talking about collaborating. And we eventually went full circle and had this installation at the 2016 New Forms Festival. So this was the version 2 of Pendula. And you'll see in this installation, so it's the two of us and Lane Butler, who we work with a lot, who is an incredible visual artist. And we have these long USB cables, and at the ends of them, we have an Arduino sensor. And that sensor lets us track the swinging motions of the swings, and then we're able to change projections.
So we showed this piece at the Vancouver International Jazz Festival. And, you know, at first, Kieran and I, we were just DIYing this. Like, we did not really have a plan to showcase it. We just wanted to experiment. You know, we were kind of just like working at my studio, you know, just setting it up, kind of like, you know, we didn't really have a plan to figure out like how we wanted to do this. And I think that was the first time I've ever like shown any kind of media artwork. It was through the Vancouver Jazz Festival. And we learned so much from that process of just like, you know, working with them, like learning about how, you know, festivals are produced from the inside, learning about how things are budgeted and things are structured. Also, and that was like the first time I've even thought about like grants. Like I've never, you know, like coming from like an DIY kind of like underground like art scene, it was like I never knew anything about grants. You know, I hadn't really made media artworks either at that point, you know. So, you know, I think Kieran was kind of like, she hit me up and she was like, yeah, let's do this. I know how to do the programming for it, you know, and I had thought about making it interactive, but I had like no clue, you know, how to do it. So we just kind of like embarked on this like, you know, learning process together, like lots of hours, just troubleshooting, figuring out, reading up, soldering our own sensors, and just kind of like, yeah, like starting to build our own hardware and just like starting from scratch. You know, luckily we had amazing mentors. You know, we worked with Dr. Bob Pritchard, who, you know, gave us a lot of mentorship on like how to work with these sensors and how to build the max patches and things like that. So it, you know, having relationships with mentors is like really important throughout our artistic journey.
Yeah, and he also opened our eyes to like the possibility of grants as well. And you know, we were like super fortunate to, you know, land a gig with Jazz Fest. But it was very humble beginnings. And I mean, you know, we made posts about it on social media, and then Rainbow Robert, who was curating, hit us up to be a part of it. But this just gives you an overview of like what it was like. So this was like in 2014, you know, we bought everything ourselves. We would just like get together, you know, there's a bunch of messy cables on the ground, and we would just install and experiment and then just have our friends test it out. And that's kind of where we came from. And a part of the installation, I mean, part of leveraging partnerships was leveraging UBC, because I had come through UBC. So that was asking for support for institutional space. So this is UBC I6 room. And part of the Pendula installation was a performance as well, where we had a quadraphonic sound performance with Clara Chandler, who's in the photo, who's a cellist, goes by Sidewalk Cellist. So we were able to test the sound in the space, because space is so hard to find as an artist, and especially when you're working on large scale work that involve multiple people and multiple technologies. It's really important to build those community partnerships to leverage access to space.
Yeah, like this is, I think this was my first time like going to like a fancy studio, you know, like if you saw the last photo, like that's the studio, that's my studio that I usually work at, you know, as like like a DIY kind of like artist, you know. So this is like, oh my God, like I didn't realize this was a thing. And it's just so grateful to have that kind of support from members of, you know, that are part of institutions that do have access to these spaces. So I think, you know, like this kind of shaped our way of, you know, our artistic journey, because like we remember what it's like to not have those kind of access to spaces. So, you know, building in that kind of like remembering that not everyone has the same access to space, that like, you know, keeping in mind that like, you know, younger artists and emerging artists are making works, and just kind of like keeping those doors like open was like a big part of our like artistic journey.
Yeah, and we learned from people who did that, you know, people from these institutions who opened the door for us. So it's like passing down that lineage too.
So I'm just gonna pull up a different video here. This one's just like a 360 video, so I gotta pull up a different app for this.
I guess you still have to share.
Oh yeah, I'll get. So, you know, fast forward 2017. That's when we started dabbling in like VR work. So this is kind of like our first VR project. And, you know, I had initially started working with this project with Emelina Fredrickson in 2016. We were building some, you know, VR kind of, you know, DIY like VR rigs. Oh, this doesn't quite work. Oh, that kind of works. It's kind of janky right now. This is actually not the way it's supposed to. Actually, let me just try pulling it from a different.
It's an interesting format for this one.
No, it's top bottom, but
Yeah.
It didn't actually. Anyways, hilariously, this is a VR dance film that we were like working on, and luckily we had the support of the National Film Board. But initially, we didn't really have any idea how we were going to get funding. You know, we applied for BC Arts Council, we got denied, and then we just continue with the project. You know, I started like cold calling like other VR companies in Vancouver that did 360 video, and luckily enough, I was able to get in touch with a colleague of mine now, Olivier, who was super eager to start working on like 360 videos with us. So we were able to create like a pitch kind of demo reel. And then we use that demo reel to bring it to the National Film Board in order for them to, you know, see what the project is about and the vision for the project, and for them to kind of like provide the funding for us to create the exhibition. So yeah, like there's lots of DIY elements, you know, and this is like a contemporary VR dance film. Like I had never worked with VR before. I think I just like tried a VR headset like for the first time, like a month before deciding to make this project happen. So like the whole process was just like learning how to do it. And in 2016, like we didn't really have the softwares to like make VR work. So it's like even working with the National Film Board, having their support, a big part of our process there, you know, working with their creative technologists was also just to figure out like, how do we even like, do we use a Mac? Do we use a PC? What softwares to use? At that point, like none of the softwares were like that seamless as it is today. So yeah, that was just kind of like the beginning of like our learning journey for this VR dance film. Kind of pull up back to the presentation.
So this film you can actually watch on YouTube if you search Tidal Traces NFB, you'll actually be able to see the 360 video in there if you'd like to watch it.
So just to kind of give you an idea, like the DIY-ness of kind of our initial stages of research was like literally, getting a 3D printed rig for, I didn't even have 6 GoPros. It was meant to be for 6 GoPros, but we had like 5 GoPros because I think at that moment, that's how much we could afford. And like literally just kind of bring this in to the ocean and start experimenting with it and start shooting with it. Like we were fortunate enough to get our kind of demo video, 360 video, and pitch that to the NFB for them to like help us realize the project in a way that we were able to, access the really fancy 16 GoPro Odyssey setup, which kind of which is a stereoscopic camera rig that kind of gives you like it's 8 directions. So you have 2 GoPros that go in each direction. So it's like 1 for each eye. So the work that you make is 3D because it has depth. And it has like its own cloud stitching, like Google Cloud stitching. So we didn't have to do any of that ourselves anymore. So we were able to kind of like rely on like better resources that the NFB was able to provide us in order for us to actually like realize the project in its full form. And Kieran also, like during this process, like our first showing, like pre-showing, was at MUTEC in Tokyo. And Kieran was in Michigan at that time, and she was sound designing and composing for the piece. And you had to like build the VR audio setup.
Yeah. So on my end, like working in different cities, I had to figure out like the VR audio workflow, which like didn't exist where I was, which became it was a little stressful. Just like, working in 2 different time zones, getting these video files and then figuring out like, okay, how do I play this video? How do I decode this video in a way that I can use it in a digital audio workstation? And then what do I need to export out so that the Oculus can read it and do the right calculations based on where the user has their head in the space. And also, like, this was the first time I've done anything like spatialized in a binaural format. So figuring out like how do you choreograph the sound? So how do you enhance where you want the users to look based on sound? And I was fortunate enough to be at an institution that also supported me in this project being outside of the institution. So I was able to meet Nancy at MUTEC Tokyo for the first showing of the work.
Yeah, and you see in this photo, this is a very rare sighting that you would see dancers also carrying the gear. So we shot this at Boundary Bay. We have Zara, Rianne, and Lexi here in their outfits made by Not Dead Yet, Adam Lynn Bungeg, which is one of our collaborators for Union. Yeah, like you can see like this, it's a very DIY kind of process here where we have Vincent here from the NFB and me carrying the case. It's like trying to figure out how to bring all of this gear into the middle of the ocean, set it up, shoot it, and then bring it back before the tide kind of eats us alive. So like a big part of, the research, I think this is kind of working with Emelina Fredrickson. This is kind of the beginning of our process of like learning about like the body and choreography, kind of diving more into understanding like how immersive media and how the body works, and how considering like the ethics that kind of come into play when we create immersive works that often, is a very intimate experience for people like with VR and stuff like that. And like how we can, have additional kind of considerations for the body, for the performers, for us as co-creators, and for the audience when we kind of make works like that. Because, in like 2016, 2017, like a lot of VR works back then was like very jarring and was kind of like, some of them was overstimulating. There was like elements of like cyber sickness that hasn't been like totally researched as much. So, just like taking all those things into consideration, like how can we create work where, we can be kind to the body of the audience members, even though like I felt like the dancers here definitely had to endure a lot of very, very difficult dancing environments, but they were amazing troopers for this project. And yeah, it was like the first contemporary VR dance film, a 360 dance film that was made.
Yeah, so our second exploration of virtual reality came through this VR, the surround sound VR performance environment, which is called Telepresence, which you're viewing right now. And Telepresence came about from, I think it was like right after Tidal Traces. I had met the musical director,
music curator
at Western Front, or the one at the time, DB Boyko, and we were talking about future works, and I always had this idea of like, coming from working with Tidal Traces and working with dance and choreography. I was thinking in my head, like, how can you create a piece where like virtual reality, instead of like being so foreground in our experience, like when you're in a virtual reality headset, it's like you're in your own individualistic experience, you're by yourself and you're just witnessing and you're a part of it. But how do we create an environment that is collective, and how do we enhance this environment to a musical performance? And so that became the impetus of Telepresence. And Telepresence took a couple years to fundraise with DB, and it resulted in partnerships with Emily Carr, and a big partnership with Emily Carr and Basically Good Media Lab, who were able to give us space. And so we collaborated with JP Carter, who is performing on trumpet. And during our research process, we were experimenting with different virtual or like objects, game objects in Unity. And we would study like, okay, if we have this game object in space and we're viewing it in VR, how does it feel in our bodies? So this is where like the body comes in as well. Where when you come into a VR space or into a performance space, you come with all of your past and your memories. And based on that, and based on this collective group, you're creating this new experience for everyone based on your past relationships with the technology and yourself.
Yeah, and this project, it took us a couple times. Like we weren't successful the first time when we applied for the grant. And then we had to try again, kind of like reconceptualize the project a little bit more, fine tune it a little bit more in order for us to, have a successful grant application. And, a lot of the collaborators in this project, like, you see the video, there's like Lane Butler, he is someone that was part of the kind of the DIY music world that I come from, and we started collaborating with Pendula and stuff. And then also like Ian Lavery was someone that you had known from UBC.
Yeah. So Ian and I worked together on artistic projects at UBC with the Laptop Orchestra. And so Ian helped us develop this networked app. So everyone who's wearing the headset is able to experience the VR, the virtual experience at the same time.
Yeah, this is just an image of the studio space that we were able to access at Emily Carr. And it's really important, like for any kind of grant application, especially project grant application, for you to have like firm and well-established partnerships moving into like when you apply for it, because like for example, for this project Telepresence, we were presented by the Western Front. But we had a partnership with Emily Carr that offered us the space and offered us some presentation opportunity and student engagement opportunity with its cohort as well too. So we were able to not only leverage the space, we were also able to leverage the community access that they had in order for us to present our work, which kind of which it helps your grants, it helps your applications, and it helps your projects to to reach more audiences, to have something, to have like a exhibition or presentation date that is already secure and already pre-negotiated.
Yeah, so this is just another photo of us in our stances, our power stances, starting the piece or experimenting with the piece. So the piece actually had so it had 8-channel surround speakers, and then we also had 4 tube amplifiers.
And this piece was we were able to bring it to South Korea, Gwangju, to show at the International Symposium on Electronic Art in 2019. Yeah, and I think Kieran and I, like throughout our process, like all of our projects we've written and we've published on, because like a big part of our practice is not like just making art, it's also developing new workflows and new pipelines for emerging technology and the use of all the different emerging tools. So like, with like, I never even thought about this, but like with the first project, Pendula, like Kieran actually, encouraged us to submit this to a musical interface, like a symposium paper. So we started writing these like papers about and documenting our process, our creative process and research process through writing. And we've done that with Tidal Traces as well, because all of these workflows are like novel and new, and same with Telepresence. And I think that has like given us a lot of opportunities to not only be able to present work within arts institution, we're also able to present and travel with our work within some academic institutions that are also partnered with other arts institutions in other places in the world.
Yeah, and I would say too, there's a lot of like technical and pipeline stuff when working with technology, but a big part too is like there's so much space for pioneering in this like media arts world with like, aesthetic thinking. And I think that's what's so important about like publishing these papers, is so that it gives people a voice to what developing new ways of thinking about media art and immersion and presentation. And people use those. I mean, people have referenced our papers too, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, and also just to take up space in like a very male-dominated field,
Yeah.
Academia, and then also like the electronic arts too. So,
Yeah.
Even just being bodies in those places and being like, this is our work and this is our research, and we're technically, savvy, and that, we're not just performers, because, oftentimes we're moving in these spaces, they think you're the performer. But it's like, no, we develop the entire pipeline.
Yeah, and sometimes those spaces are uncomfortable.
It is super
It's
uncomfortable.
very uncomfortable.
It sucks, but like you got to do it.
And sometimes you disagree with what's being presented. But yeah, as Nancy said, it's important to take up space in those institutions. But we also realize that like writing papers is also a skill. And we're both fortunate enough to have like university education where writing is so ingrained in our educational system.
So this is just like another video. So while all this stuff is happening, I continue to throw underground kind of like parties. I know this is such a strange sight to look at how many people are at these parties. But this is a party that we threw in like 2017 for Chapel Sound, which is like a grassroots media arts collective that is based in Vancouver. And most of my connections and relationships with like artists and stuff like that is through this like underground community. Now that I have more opportunities to show, in gallery spaces or like in other like academic institutions, I have new networks. But honestly, like this like whole like scene, this underground music, and that's where me and Kieran met, but this scene kind of like allowed us to kind of connect with people and connect with other artists that all have a same passion for like community building and grassroots building, but are all like super multi-talented. This party was thrown, organized in collaboration with like Eli Muro, who is like currently on our union project as a web designer, and like Lane Butler as well too. So, I think like it's really important to not forget about like the grassroots contributions and like keeping connected with the community, because it's like, like institutions and stuff like that, they can come and go, but it's like at the end of the day, like I know this is the community that will have my back. And that will like, support me throughout like any kind of transitions or in my journey. In this photo here, so in 2017, we also, with Soledad Munoz and Ash Luck, we actually started like this current feminist electronic symposium in 2017. And this is kind of the beginning of this like project where, we felt like, Vancouver's like electronic music scene was like too bro heavy. So too many dude bros on lineups. So we essentially were like, screw it. Like we're gonna create a, symposium and festival for like women and non-binary artists, for and by women and non-binary artists. And also host like panels talking about like these issues, and also host workshops. And in this picture, you have Kieran here facilitating a synth building workshop.
Yeah, and I think it's important to, when we talk about like grassroots organizations, it's important to realize that, we have these like grand institutions, we're able to travel to these academic places and galleries, but as artists, we also have agency to create our own opportunities. And we do that through these grassroots organizations and building community. And I think Current is a great example of that, having these educational workshops, having performances, having talks and panels where people can come, but they can also volunteer. And, like we met through volunteering for a Vancouver nonprofit, and then we started collaborating. So part of my practice too is like community building and mentoring and creating opportunities. I had an amazing time leading this workshop for Current, when we could meet in person and physically build stuff together. So everyone here built an Atari Punk console synth.
This is just like a photo of like a performance. So this is actually artist XO, who is our graphic designer and our like a visual media artist that worked on Union as well too. So as you see, like we wanted to illustrate through this presentation that like the people that are on our current project Union, we've had long relationships with like over the years. So this is our collaboration process is through a deep process of like relationship building, like over the years, and trust building, and like over the years. So it's these relationships don't just come out of nowhere. I think it's important to note that in order to have strong collaborators and strong collaborative relationships, it's important to nurture your community, and to like you reap what you sow ultimately. So this is Varen performing for Current in 2017. And it's really amazing to like work with different artists. I met Varen like at a Chapel Sound thing like in 2014. So it's like throughout the years to be able to witness someone's artistic journey, and then also be able to like be in awe of their talent, and then be able to work with them in an intimate manner is just like the most rewarding experience as an artist.
Yeah, and also just to develop a friendship on top of that too. It's one thing to like collaborate, but then to like deepen the relationship as like with being friends, I think has been so amazing. And that again like builds on this community notion.
Yeah, like we're more, it's more about like we're pals, we're friends more than like professional collaborator. Like that's like the title, like the formal title, but we're all just friends.
We're just homies.
Yeah,
and we just want to hang out and make art. That's really what it's about. Yeah.
So fast forward to 2019. So Current has done a couple iterations. We decided that we've done the festival thing where we brought tons of out of town artists. Like in 2018, we had like tons of international artists that came through. We did like a 5-day kind of like symposium with like panels, workshops, and all this stuff. And for 2019, we're like, let's look inwards, right? Like let's change up our formats, because like we can continue to like apply for more funding and develop like bigger and bigger and bigger festivals, but bigger is not always better. It's not always about endless growth. Sometimes you just have to turn inwards and look inwards. So for Current Symposium in 2019, we onboarded Jen Sunshine and then also Alex Chen to kind of join our Current team to kind of host like a 2019 mentorship program. So this mentorship program, we had 11 participants that are various artists and cultural producers that do really cool things in the city. And essentially we did a 3-day program where we paid them, and we gave them all the resources in the 3 days through our community networks that we had built over the years from like the previous editions of Current. Give them budgeting, kind of like what we did in terms of like how we budgeted our festivals, grant writing kind of workshops, connecting them with our grant funders, also like doing like space tours, connecting them with our different like venue and space and community partners, so they can start conceptualizing ideas on how they can produce their own shows or kind of structure their own collectives and their own festivals. And looking at like publicity and marketing and all that stuff, that all the logistical elements that it takes to actually like put on a festival. So like it wasn't a big showcase like the way we had before in 2018, but it was a really important thing to do, because I think especially as like people of color, especially as like women and queer folks, is like mentorship is so important. Because it's like, I'm getting older, and I'm getting tired. Like I can't stay up and, do these like shows all the time. And like, like I gotta sleep and stuff. So, so it's like, okay, well, like if I'm gonna kind of, retire from doing like so many like late night shows, like what am I going to do with all of this information that we've gathered like over the years, like that we've learned, like our learning experiences? Like we need to pass that on somehow. So that's why we decided to kind of create this mentorship program, in order for us to give us an opportunity to reflect on how we were able to create Current the previous years, and pass on all the information that we had learned, all the mistakes that we had made and learned throughout the process.
Yeah, and then fast forward to 2019. So in the previous picture, you saw there's an artist, Alana Ho, who took the Current mentorship, and Alana Ho actually took one of my workshops in 2015, and we ended up collaborating on this project called Intermediate with Johnny Ostrom. And Intermediate came about from us wanting to create what we call an educational media art festival. And what that means is that, when we talk about like emerging technologies in media art, when we talk about like accessibility, like who has access to all this new technology? Who has access to VR headsets, or like even like a computer with like a great GPU card that can handle like projections and things like that? So we really wanted to open up the space and create like a new ecology where we invited participants focusing on marginalized groups to come and learn from scratch what is media art, and how do you create interactive projections, and how do you even build a computer and keep the computer too, so that you're able to collaborate with other folks afterwards. So this happened in 2019, the fall of 2019, and it was a 2-day event. And we also had artist talks as well. And one of our artist talks was by Chimeric, which is a Vancouver media art collective. And Sammy Chen, who's part of Chimeric, ended up also collaborating with us on Union.
Yeah, so this is just like another example how, you know, like things like our collaborator and things that kind of like happen for a reason, right? It's not like we don't just pick our collaborators, or like it comes organically. Like these relationships like reveal themselves, you know, in these kinds of like community interactions, you know, that we have over the years, right? Like it's like, okay, the time is right now, that it's the time where we can kind of create an artwork together or make something together, because, you know, it does take, you know, years of like trust building in order for us to have to, you know, it's a very intimate thing to collaborate, and to, you know, there's ups and downs for sure. Things work some days and then things don't work some days. And, you know, I think it's important to be able to have relationships that are strong enough to handle like the stressors, you know, to handle like the stress test of like, you know, creating like a complicated project together.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is like developing the communication style or communication skill, and also being organized, which is something we've had to work on and have only started to like get kind of good at this last project. But yeah.
So no, go ahead. You want to say?
I was just gonna say, I think communication, being able to be honest and having clear communication and documentation, you know, having meeting notes, talking about action items, I think is very key when it comes to collaboration. It's like, even though you're homies and you're friends and you've done it before, there still needs to be like a sense of like ownership
and accountability. It's like, I think with Kieran and I, it's like, you know, like over the years and like working with all the collaborators, it's like we just want direct, honest communication. It's like, if you have a problem, say it, you know. And you know, and that really helps. And like I think that goes like just like the way we collaborate. You know, not everyone collaborates the way we do, but like at the end of the day, like it's not really about, like, the project is one thing. You know, you make the project, people see the project tours, blah, 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 blah. That's like, it's no longer your baby. You know, you have the baby and the baby's like walking and it does its own thing. But it's like the relationships of the collaborators that we hang on to, that we get to continue to nurture, because it gives us new opportunities for us to like make more work in the future together. Because like those are the friendships that really, I think it's really like really dear to us. I think more so, I don't know, at least for me, I think those relationship is more valuable and more dear to me than like whatever artwork I make.
Absolutely. You know, it's like you do the artwork and then you start working on something else. It's fleeting, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this is just an image, a screenshot. So Kieran and I, so fast forward 2020, COVID happens, you know, everything is canceled. And everyone's stuck at home and, you know, on screens and stuff. So, you know, I had the great privilege of being invited by the I Am For Media Lab at Emily Carr to teach some immersive technology like workshops. When I was invited to teach these workshops, I was like, how am I gonna make a workshop about VR, like when you don't have access to any gear? And this kind of goes back to when Kieran was talking about like with intermediate and even with current symposium, it's just like accessibility to technology is a privilege, and not everyone has the same access to privilege as COVID has shown, the extreme like wealth disparity and lack of equity that permeates within our like artistic community. So, I started developing this workshop, and it's like essentially it's a web VR workshop using A-Frame, which is like a web kind of it's using HTML and simple HTML coding to build like a VR environment. So you don't even need a headset. You just need to have any kind of computer, like Mac, PC, whatever computer, and you just need to have any kind of web browser for you to kind of like start accessing the different HTML codes that we can like type in together. So this platform is it's called Glitch, and it's kind of like Google Docs, but for like coding and like building apps online collaboratively. And using these tools, I was able to start teaching these like VR workshops to like members of different communities like all over the place, because now I'm no longer constrained to like a physical space because of like being able to find tools that are more accessible through the internet. And Kieran and I, we were part of like a music video web VR workshop a few months ago as well, just like kind of like bringing in the different elements of like using sound and then combining it with visuals in kind of this like VR environment using strictly only free softwares and free platforms.
Yeah, just building a web app.
Yeah, if you guys are interested in more of these workshops, like follow IM4 Media Lab on Facebook or Instagram. They have like tons of workshops all the time.
Yeah.
And they're all like very, very much accessible for people from like all different sorts of like media art levels and literacy. Yeah, so again, like mentorship, super important in our practice. It also just like keeps us like, honestly, like watching the participants in these workshops just like build these worlds, these VR worlds so quickly is like so rewarding, because you're just like, oh my gosh, like you see the learning right away. And like before this workshop, because like, obviously I was DJing before, and like all of my gigs were canceled and just working on Union. I started kind of moving into teaching, and like prior to this, like I hadn't really taught. And I remember like panicking and like calling Kieran and be like, oh God, these people hit me up for a workshop. I don't know how to teach. Like, I don't know what to do, but, having like supportive, like peers and mentors kind of like coaxing, like, just like making sure that, like giving me ideas on like what to look out to, what to look out for, and creating like a workshop to create like a nice, fun, like workshop where like people on Zoom, because there's also challenges with keeping people engaged on Zoom. Like I never thought I would be an educator or instructor. And this is kind of a whole new path for me, because back then I was more of like a producer, for festivals, or a curator. I never really moved into like the educational realm, but, like with the support of my peers, I was able to like gain the confidence to start developing like curriculums to be taught through the internet.
Yeah, and I came from more of a like mentorship and educational background in my training at UBC. So when I graduated, I knew that was something that I wanted to develop more, and also give back and strengthen the community. So for a while now, I've been developing, music technology and sound workshops that are dedicated to like women, femmes, and marginalized communities, to give access to that information and that technology.
Fast forward to 2021. This is the Richmond Art Gallery. It's just a photo of like an art documentation photo by Byron Dauncey of our exhibition here. So, often people are like, how do you get connected to gallery spaces? How do you even get to put on a show? Or how do you even get people?
How do you get a gig?
How do you get a gig? How do you put yourself out there and stuff?
Yeah.
And I think, at least for me, I think the reason why I get the opportunities I get is not really because of the artwork I make is actually has everything to do with the community work that I'm engaged with. So like my community following and the community work that I do and the panels I speak on, and the advocacy work that I do for like arts funding, I think that actually helps my artistic career way more than actually just me making the work itself.
Yeah, I'd agree too. I think, it comes down to like community building and those relationships that you have. And because people want to work with people who they admire and they respect. And I think that's more, it's more about like those like deepened personal relationships than it is about the artwork.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like the artwork is just like an excuse for us to like get together and to for us to like imagine like a future that like we actually want to like be in. And I think like with a lot of, with the projects that, we get to do, it's, and the way we get hit up, it's like by curators, like with Yung Ju from Sin Evolution, like contacting us, those are like pre-established relationships of like folks that like are aware of the community work that we do. So, like people want to work with people that have a message and have like a stance on like what they want their work to say and what they want the future to be. Like I think it's important. Like I know I'm pretty outspoken on like what I want, what I hope the world will become. And I think, having a strong stance and belief and having integrity in how you operate and how you carry yourself is like extremely important. Yeah, come check out the exhibit.
Yeah, so I mean, the union exhibit, you'll see that there are our collaborators. I mean, the majority of them are our friends and have been our collaborators from the very beginning, since like 2014, 2015. Lane Butler is doing visuals on the project. Varen is doing graphics. Sammy Chen, who is part of Intermediate, did the interactive projections. Who else do we have?
Josue Sanchez is a longtime DOP that I work with a lot of my music video direction. I work with him.
Connor,
and then like with Not Dead Yet with Adam Lin Bungeg, he's the costume designer for Tidal Traces, the VR dance floor back in the day. And then we kind of maintained this relationship like over the years. And, obviously we hit him up when we wanted to design this like futuristic wedding dress for Union. And he was like totally down to collaborate with us, and it wasn't, all these components of Union wasn't an easy process. It was an easy journey. It definitely at some points, definitely high tension and high emotional experiences. But that's the thing. It's like you want to work with people that you can laugh and cry together. Right. So, I'm not saying
it's a journey.
Yeah, it's a journey. It's an emotional journey to like birth like a new project together.
Yeah, there's actually this poster. We're in the Richmond Art Gallery, and there's this one in the program room that says, "Art is a journey, not a destination."
It's true. Yeah,
and I think I read the poster, and I think that really sums it up. So this is the interactive floor projection. And we have the 16-channel surround sound. And part of this was working with audio designer Alex Zekovich too, who has hooked us up with other community partners too, which have gotten us gigs. So, it's like, you reap what you sow.
Yeah.
Exactly what you said. It's like creating opportunities for other people will create you opportunities in return. Like that's just how the universe works.
Mentorship is two ways, it's not like, oh, I know more information and I'm more knowledge. I'm a knowledge bearer here. And my mentee is someone who's only learning from it. Like, no, it works two ways. Like when you mentor someone who is emerging with more emerging than you are, it's a two-way street. Like you give them certain information. I learn about new music and like new aesthetics from like the younger generation, like all the time. I learn so much from folks that are younger or more emerging than I am. And, it's just as fulfilling and it's two ways. So I do encourage, folks that, you know, are entering the art world, you know, to start contributing to your community and to start building those relationships through volunteer opportunities or even just joining workshops to kind of like start building your mentorship relationships. You know, like even with this project, like, you know, we started this in like started fundraising for this in 2018. And like, we had like one grant rejection with this project too. It took us,
I think it was a couple. Wasn't
Yeah,
it?
it was a
It was like
couple.
a couple grant rejections before we actually secured funding
for this project.
So, you know, just because, you know, it doesn't work out one round doesn't mean that your project sucks or it's not going to happen. It's just not the right time.
Yeah.
And,
So,
you know, maybe that means like reconceptualizing or stepping away and developing it more. But there's always that possibility. The possibility is always there.
yeah. And, you know, like, I feel like, you know, people think like, oh, we get grants all the time. It's like we get more rejections than we actually get the grants.
Yeah.
But people don't see that. People see the project that you do and they're like, oh, great, this project. But it's like, you don't realize how many rejection letters actually kind of was like, came with the project, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's important to note that, like, you know, it's great to have like validation from like arts institutions and from arts councils and stuff like that. But the value and your worth is not about the art institution's validation, because art institutions also carry other kinds of things that they need to fulfill and they need to do. So your value, you know, as an artist has a lot, it's more about you being secure in who you are, and your value is much easier for you to kind of see your value through those grassroots community connections. Because, you know, getting validation through like arts funding or through like arts institutions, you know, oftentimes arts institutions and arts funders, like they carry other, this is some structural stuff, you know, like
they have their own biases.
They have their own biases, you know, they're working on, you know, their decolonization and reconciliation efforts, you know, which is like very much needed in the Canadian arts, the arts like institutional system. So like, you know, especially as like, you know, people of color, you know, sometimes we feel like, oh, like I need to make work that is like, that would be fundable by these arts institutions, you know, like thinking too much about what these institutions like want you to say. But I think it's like, it's not fruitful to think that way, because it's really discouraging, because then you put in all this effort and like you kind of assess your own worth through the lens of these institutions. And I think like in the long run, like that is just like totally like not sustainable. And, you know, like kind of coming back to the roots of like being like, you know, DIY artists, like it's really important for us to have those community relationships, for those people to remind us our worth. You know, like the people that come through the gallery that, you know, see the space and see the exhibition, and having those like one-on-one like personal interactions, like those, like someone like another like Asian queer person that's in this space telling me how much they love the work, that is like more valuable than any award, any like institutional validation that I can ever get, you know? So like at the end of the day, it's about personal relationships that will support your artistic journey.
Thanks, Nancy and Kieran. That was a great presentation, and we have a few comments and questions. One was, you know, going off your last comment, is just how collaboration is all about building those genuine relationships, from Sammy Joe. So a question from Zara is, what has your process been for developing the concepts collaboratively? Do the concepts or the medium arise for you first?
Concepts or mediums arise for you first?
Both,
Yeah,
I think.
I think both, yeah. For developing concepts collaboratively, I mean, definitely project specific, but I think it comes back to like building that relationship and that trust even before thinking about things conceptually, because there's something to be said about like creating the right environment for in creating like the right environment and safe space for you to imagine these concepts.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
It's like you gotta create the
ambiance, the vibe.
The vibe has to be right first, right?
You gotta click.
Yeah, the vibe has to be right first, and then the magic will just like
It'll
it'll just happen
It's
organically.
like you got to get food first.
You know, like we gotta eat,
Gotta eat.
we gotta
Yeah.
dance,
Yeah.
we gotta enjoy,
Listen to music.
feel
maybe
the
go
vibe.
for a walk.
You know, like I think,
Yeah.
and that's why like those parties, I mean, we miss that so much, you know, especially as like, oh, as like queer people, is like, oh man, like I feel so like alienated from my community because we don't have this like weekly gathering anymore where you just get to like be in the presence of each other, right? And that's why those like, you know, partying, in my opinion, is like so important because that's where you get to like go out and get to like meet different people and like know that people are like, whether they're on your wavelength or not. And it just kind of creates this like random factor too. It's like you get to bring different people, different backgrounds, different talents, different disciplines into a space, and then you kind of like shake it through like DJing and music, I guess. And then like different kinds of interactions kind of happen, you know, and I love seeing it like over the years, like throwing events, like seeing all the different people that, you know, that didn't know each other, and you see they're at your event and it's like, oh, well, okay, they're collaborating. Oh, they're dating. Oh, they're like started a new band together. You know, it's great to see that like cross-pollination happen.
So just sort of on that, like, what would your advice be for someone who, say, just moved here or maybe wants to start working in sort of a new community? Like maybe, you know, I've been a solo painter for all these years, but I want to break into a totally different medium and meet people in that community. So what sort of advice would you have for someone who's new to a different community?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak for myself. I mean, this is pre-COVID. I can speak for
Of course.
pre-COVID, but you know, in my experience, like going to like you know, going to school and like not going to too many events, but then, you know, after that, I just did a lot of research online. Like I was just like researching different organizations, and you know, you get into a rabbit hole of clicking, and then you end up finding like other grassroots groups, and I would cold email people as well. Like I think that was like super powerful. Like we feel like you know, you might feel like the person might not email back, and it's not really about that. It's about just like reaching out and seeing what the possibilities are. And from my experience, like, you know, if I get a cold email from someone, from a younger artist, or someone that's just moved here and wants to like get to know the community, this is where like giving back and like creating that community comes back, where it's like you're, by being a part of it, you're giving back and opening up the space for other folks. So I would say like researching online, cold emailing, and events will come back. You know, a big part of my artistic journey was like going to these events by myself, you know, like having that confidence of like, you know, I was in like my early 20s, just like, okay, I don't know what this is, but I'm just going to go to it and maybe talk to the artist, or maybe talk to other folks there, or like volunteering for a festival and meeting people and like doing the work that's like not very glamorous, you know, like Nancy and I were like painting tables with like the smallest paintbrushes, but it's you're still a part of it, you know, even if you're like, yeah, the door person, or you know, it's like every single like action you have like speaks, right? And it will evolve the more that you permeate into it.
Yeah, 95% of it is just showing up. Be
Exactly.
reliable. You know, if you're going to volunteer for something, just show up. Show up when you say you're going to show up. And if you do that enough, you will become part of the community.
Mhm.
Like it's very simple. Like people think like, oh, how do I be?
I got to network. I got to
just show up.
Yeah.
Show up to all the events. Show up. Stay behind. Help with clearing the events. Talk to the people that are working there. Ask how you can help. You know, just offer support. And the more you do that, people will start to notice, and people will start to build trust with you. And then you can, you know, like with some of the like events that we were doing like way back in like 2014 with Chapel Sound and stuff like that, that was it. It was just like literally like DIY small like house party kind of like DJ events, and more and more people started showing up from like, it was like, 6 people just jamming, on the floor and like in a house, and then like it turned to like a 500-person event. It's just like people start to show up, and if you're consistent and you're reliable and you say you're going to do something, you'll start kind of becoming included in like the family and in the collective, right? Because it's all just about, it's all a game of trust, at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, I can't wait for events to come back so that we can start participating in those things. I mean, I know just as someone who works with a lot of volunteers, I mean, you're so right. Showing up is half the battle. So yeah. And then same, I guess, similarly, not just looking for community, but looking for mentors. I mean, I know, Kieran, you were mentioning a lot of it came from your studies at UBC and your connections with UBC. But what if you're someone who hasn't gone to school here? How would you connect with a mentor?
Yeah, I think that definitely relates to the last question too, of like going out to things and, if you admiring folks too and reaching out to them as well.
Just reach out.
Just reach out. If you admire someone and you want to get to know them and you want to learn from them, just reach out.
Reach out.
See what happens.
Offer something, like offer your time, offer some other support, I think like people are social animals, like we want to connect with people. And if you reach out to like someone that you want a mentorship with, or you want to just learn more about, like invite them for a dinner, take them out for a coffee, or just show up to their shows more and start helping them with cleanup. Because there's a bunch of like very not glamorous jobs in like being an artist, and if you are willing to participate in like supporting other artists that you want to be mentored by, and by volunteering your time by like doing those very glamorous tasks, like we're so thankful for that.
It's like maybe you're really good at organizing. Like we're
not good at organizing. Like maybe you're really good. You don't know anything about media art, but you're super good at file management.
Yeah, file management.
Or or organizing like calendar, or like cleaning up emails. Like it could be like
anything.
Anything, and I think I
think it's also remembering too, like as someone who is aspiring, is that you might not think that you don't have anything to offer, but you do. And I think that's the biggest thing as well. It's like, oh, I don't want to reach out to this person because, I'm self-conscious of like, how much I've done in my past and like my skill sets, but you have all the skill sets.
Yeah.
You are capable. And again, like showing up, volunteering, being on time, and showing that you're reliable, is a big thing.
I mean, that's all it takes, to be honest. In Vancouver, that's literally all it takes. Just being reliable and show up when you're going to show up all the time.
Yeah.
And you will have a career eventually.
No, I hear you.
Don't do that.
I know. Yep. I was really interested too in hearing about your working with symposiums and using that and conferences kind of as another way to get your work out there. That's not really something I had thought about. So I guess any sort of tips for people on that? Like how would you, like, especially if you're not a writer, like you two are great at writing, but like if you just kind of wanted to start, dipping your toe in that field, any suggestions?
Yeah, I think, one of the biggest thing is like start researching. Yeah, like again, if you've reached out to artists in the community that are part of those mediums or part of those conversations, reaching out to them, but using online to Google papers and such. And also if you have friends who have gone to like these academic institutions like UBC, using their logins to find papers, because that's another thing is like you need to have access to all these papers as well, which is very unfortunate. But hitting up folks that could give you access to them. Yeah.
I mean, as media artists, I do find that there are some electronic art symposiums that are totally free and available online.
Exactly.
the International Symposium on Electronic Art, something that we both submit to. If you just Google that, like you'll be able to see all of their archives and all the papers like over the years, and that's just like free and available online. So I think just using online tools to start researching and just start reading more of these publications, it will help. It will just help you build your knowledge and help you kind of inform like what works kind of exist already. I think it's important before you conceptualize a project to know like what is out there or who's been doing it. And if it's like someone that also has a similar interest, just email them, you know, DM them, reach out to them, and then start chatting. And I think that's kind of the best way to kind of go about like conceptualizing new projects, and also like getting some support, you know, like sometimes you never know what these interactions and these this kind of dialogue through just cold calls can kind of bring you.
Yeah, and I think we can both speak to that because, you know, we both have papers online and we've both been hit up by like other, whether they be like academics or like artists too, that are like, oh, I read your paper online and I'd love to talk to you more about this project, or I've been thinking about something similarly, can we talk about it? So, you know, just speaking from experience, like that has happened to us, and that has, you know, we've responded to those emails as well and inquiries.
Great tips. So I know that you're still kind of in the thick of things with Union, but looking ahead, I mean, do you have any plans for, I'm thinking more along the mentorship lines, because you both seem very interested in, you know, offering that either through workshops or conferences or whatever. And knowing the world is slowly opening up right now, do you have any plans upcoming in the future or events that you would like to potentially host coming up?
Yeah, you have.
I just want
to have mentorship.
Yeah, I do have mentorships. Well, I work with Festival of Reported Movement, kind of movement on screen and dance film. I'm an artistic mentor for that festival. I also work with various artists in Vancouver, kind of doing mentorship programs. You know, mentorship is one thing too. Like at the end of the day, like we all need like a collective like catharsis and like a big party. So we can kind of like, you know, like shed this like COVID, like, you know, this COVID kind of year, so we could just kind of like start anew. And I think I'm just excited to start throwing events again. You know, like it's been too long, you know, and I have a studio space in Chinatown. And I used to throw events like, you know, different film screenings, like music shows, like ambient music shows, dance parties, and just various different kinds of things at my space. And I think like that's kind of like what I'm kind of excited to do, is to just start gathering different types of like-minded people in a space and start kind of like getting that, I don't know, that it's like alchemy, you know, it's just like you put enough interesting people in a space and like something magical will happen.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, like I definitely have felt the exhaustion of like online events and screen time, you know, especially like being a media artist and being on screen. But I am looking forward to redeveloping what intermediate would look like for the next edition, and thinking about how to create this environment or intermediate, like thinking about like learning media technologies outside. So that's something that we've been delving into.
Great, sounds great. Well, I will, when we have the recording available, I will include some of these links to the events that you're talking about. Also that IM4 website sounds like another great resource. So I will definitely include those in the links in the video recording. So we are nearing our end time. So I will say again, big thank you, Nancy and Kieran. That was really informative. I think our artists in the audience learned a lot. I know I did, just all the different opportunities that are out there and that are hopefully coming back soon as well. So thank you. And thank you to the Cinevolution team. I know you're out there in the audience watching today. And thanks, Melanie, for all the tech help. And for everyone out there sharing your sunny weekend with us today. We really appreciate you tuning in today. I hope you'll come back next month. Next month, I have two guest artists who also collaborate, Puya Kalili and Charlotte Wall. They have been working for many years together on large sculptural public art installations. So they'll be sort of sharing tips on what it's like not to just collaborate with another artist, but in public art, collaborating with city staff and construction workers and the type of people you need to help you build an artwork together. So the link will be up next week and you can sign up for that one, and we'll see you then in June. And then I think in July, we will actually be seeing you in person. At least fingers crossed, that's the hope. So thank you everyone. So till next time, stay safe, enjoy the sunshine out there, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.